Hello, everyone, and welcome back to In Her Element. If you're new here, this is a space where we talk about growth, identity, becoming, and all the in between moments that don't always fit into neat success stories. And if you've been here for a while, you already, these episodes are less about answers and more about reflection. About sitting with ideas long enough for them to settle into your bodies. And today's episode is one of those. It's not loud. It's not about any instructional, life story or about hustle, manifestation, or checking boxes. It's about asking for the things, that feel big, asking for things that feel unreasonable, and also asking for things that you've been quietly wanting but you haven't fully allowed yourself to name, because somewhere along the way many of us learned that wanting too much was a problem, and I want to gently question that today. There was a long period in my life when I believed that desire needed to be justified. That if I wanted something, I had to earn it first, explain it, make it sound logical, and make it sound humble. I grew up believing that hard work would eventually be rewarded and that asking was unnecessary and maybe even inappropriate. And honestly, I believe that that came from, love, from culture, from well meaning advice, and the idea that if you stay focused, disciplined, and patient, life will eventually meet you where you are. And while that's partly true, there's something missing from that narrative. What no one told me was that clarity is also work, that naming what you want is a skill, and that asking is not the opposite of humility. It's actually the opposite of self erasure. And for a long time, I asked softly, I asked carefully, and sometimes so carefully that even my own mind didn't fully register the ask. And when you ask that way, nothing really moves. And it's not because you're incapable, but because you have given your desire no real shape. And I think my first encounter with this, one of the first biggest asks of my life, it didn't actually come from confidence. Actually came from a place of frustration, from a place of feeling boxed in, from realizing that the life that I had carefully built, no longer fit who I was becoming. Hence, the ask was a move, leaving everything I knew behind, everything that felt familiar, everything that I had planned for years. And I didn't wake up being brave one day. I just knew I couldn't stay where I was at that point. And I wanted to start again in a new place, in an almost new field, without knowing how much it would actually work out. And I think at that time, it felt unreasonable because it felt like too much to want. Like, I was asking life to bend around my own discomfort. But I think what I didn't realize then was that I wasn't asking for comfort. I was asking for alignment. And slowly, piece by piece, that alignment began to show itself. And today, I am not just living that dream, I'm living more than what I imagined. And it's not because everything went according to plan and, the universe gave me what I wanted, but it was because, my ask, it definitely changed me. There is something fascinating, about this, what happens in our mind when we ask it clearly. And neuropsychology actually tells us that when you name a desire with conviction and clarity, your brain starts to work very differently. It begins to filter information through a new lens. It notices opportunities that, it once ignored. It starts connecting dots, that it didn't actually see before. And if you never ask, if you keep that desire vague or hidden, even from yourself, your mind has nowhere to go. and neither does your energy. Asking doesn't always guarantee outcomes, but it definitely creates a direction. Another example that I would like to share with you was in 2024, I went through a phase where stress and grief had quietly taken over my life. I was functioning, I was showing up, but something in me had dulled. I realized I wasn't dreaming anymore. I wasn't asking life for anything. I was just trying to get through the days. And the moment that I realized this, I had a very unsettling feeling because optimism, a positive outlook, has always been a part of how I move through the world since I was a kid. And suddenly, all of that felt very distinct. And that's when it kind of hit me. I hadn't lost my capability, I had just lost my willingness to ask. And that's when I decided to flip the script. This podcast actually came from that shift. I spoke about it out loud before even I knew how it would look. Before I knew who would listen, before I felt ready, I spoke about it because I needed some inspiration, because I needed support, because I wanted to be in a community with women who believe in lifting each other up. And once I said it out loud, something definitely changed. I started noticing signs. There were stories, there were these conversations, there were quotes, and signs of women showing up with conviction. And I think almost a year later, the energy shifted again. There was a momentum, there was clarity, I had the courage. It wasn't like the fear had disappeared somewhere, but I think it was the ask that had already been made, which kind of started the situations and the current podcast into motion. And I'll be honest, at first, because I was in the phase of the stress and the grief, my inner critique was really loud. It was like, are you asking for too much? How is this even possible? How are you going to manage it with this PhD? And definitely, who do you think you are? And in all honesty, I think that voice came from culture, from gendered expectations, from years of being taught to stay within a sort of invisible boundary. But I think over time, as I kept asking, that inner critique, that voice definitely softened. And now it sounds more like this: wish for the world, you'll land somewhere meaningful. Let's be honest, and I do because this is an honest conversation. Confidence, it doesn't arrive together all at once. It builds brick by brick and very quietly. And it's also through acts of repeated self trust, and each ask that strengthens that trust. And I think here's what I learned, that when you ask timidly, even your own mind doesn't hear it. But when you ask boldly and clearly, every part of you listens. Your thoughts start aligning, your actions follow, and your courage just grows. And the universe, which is honestly really just you responding to yourself, meets you there. If you are listening to this as a young woman hoping for something more, or as someone who's standing at the edge of a decision, questioning everything, I want you to hear this very gently. You are not asking for too much. You are asking from the truth of who you are becoming. And there is nothing unreasonable about that. And as my favorite actor Shah Rukh Khan says in Om Shanti Om, and I truly believe in this, is that अगर किसी चीज को तुम दिल से चाहो तो पूरी कायनात उसे तुमसे मिलाने में लग जाती है. So before we end this today, I want to leave you with this. If there's something you've been wanting quietly, something that you've been carrying in your heart but hesitating to name, let this be your gentle permission to ask for it. Ask without shrinking, ask without apologizing, and ask without trying to make it sound more reasonable than it already is. Because asking doesn't make you entitled, it makes you very honest. And maybe the answer won't come exactly the way you imagined. Maybe it will arrive slowly or sideways or in forms that you didn't even expect. But something shifts the moment when you dare to ask. If this episode resonated with you, I hope you carry that courage with you into your week, into your conversations, and into the choices you are standing at the edge of right now. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for listening so openly as always. And I hope you leave this episode feeling a little more grounded, a little more confident, and a little more in your element. Have a great day, guys. Bye.